Good day and welcome to a new video. Welcome to the scene painting process videos. So this is part 1. Unfortunately we couldn't do a live stream because it didn't appear at any stage. So this is the recorded video and welcome. You can like, share, subscribe. Yeah, thanks for joining me today. So here is the recorded video. Thank you very much. Good times. We'll go to our first question. So how do you approach a scene, Megan?
Um, I don't really have a process. Some artists like to sketch up concepts and stuff. I sort of just throw some lines on the canvas in terms of digital art. I usually sketch a few things on different layers, and eventually I come up with some sort of concept or composition that I like, and then I just begin fixing it up and then painting it.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of the same, you know. I have to come up with the idea first, so it starts off with me just doing sketches that don't really look very appealing. They're just there to show me what it may look like, where the characters are situated, and where they are sitting, everything like that. So yeah, there's a bit of work towards sketching it to start off with. It seems that this way of streaming's not working that well. So we might do something at the moment.
A lot of times, I have found in the past, if I want to do something that is more intricate and detailed and has multiple subjects, I actually have an easier time sketching it out on paper first, and doing small thumbnails, and then maybe coming up with a 5x7 rough of that, and then taking it to digital. Or I implement layers in Photoshop and will do a really, really rough sketch, and then do a layer on top, sketch it a little cleaner, and then start painting it.
Awesome. Yeah, it's close to the same process for me, you know. I definitely have to start on paper sometimes, which, you know, yeah, to me it doesn't really matter if you sketch it digitally or sketch it traditionally. I find it can be useful to do it digitally as well as traditionally. But yeah, it all depends on the way you approach it. I've done many scenes in the past, like creating a drawing of heaps of Christmas decorations all together, and also vegetables all together. Yeah, so there's a lot that goes into it. Like, you have to understand the poses of different animals. Mm. And yeah, do you feel that some poses in your scenes and with your characters are a challenge, and how do you overcome them?
Yeah, I think a lot of times there can be difficulty with different poses, especially when you want to create interaction among characters. You have perspective involved and lighting involved. I think, one of the best ways is to use reference or to take your own reference photos if you can, to find something close to sort of emulate the scene that you're going for. And sometimes it may be that you'll have to redraw it a few times, or if you just can't get it right, sometimes you have to sacrifice a bit of creativity and kind of tweak your design so that you can create something that meets your expectation, even if it's not the exact same scene that you originally wanted to create.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, some people are kind of, I wouldn't say born, but have that talent of creating what they see in their head. You know, they can see a scene in their head and they can produce it on paper pretty good. Um, yeah, there's for this piece here, I did do a few idea sketches and things like that. So you know, I had many ideas I had to come up with. I made myself come up with at least 10 ideas. I think we had to come up with 10 ideas. But I think I overreached there. I did like 12 ideas in the end. But I start off with doing heaps of ideas, trying to get, you know, the bad ideas out there, and then get the better ideas out there, and then start narrowing it down from there. With each project I get, I do kind of do that process. I do heaps of thumbnail sketches, and try and keep these thumbnail sketches like real small, so that you're not working on them trying to make them look beautiful that much. Because then you're not taking up too much time. It's just you get an idea in your head and you draw that little sketch out what you think it would look like, where the characters, what, and you can write notes as well. It doesn't have to be imagery at that point. To me, it can just be words like, this is where I want him. It's a scene about these characters meeting. So yeah, I had this idea in my head of these characters meeting. I had many ideas, like maybe the one character could be running away from another. This one I felt one of my strongest. It was the scene of my Pugosaurus going to have a drink from the water, but he meets this new character. But yeah, I've left it quite open as well to interpretation to what's going on. And as you can see, it's very rough, and I am going over it again and again, trying to get the poses right and trying to get or every element I'm trying to get going right. Yeah.
So for this particular scene, did you just think of some creatures you wanted to illustrate and then decided to make a scene with it, or did you think of the actual interaction first and then decide what characters you wanted to put into that scene?
I've more like the interactions first, like how the scene will look and pan out. Because for me, I already had all the characters kind of designed, so it was a way of showcasing all the characters I have designed in the past already. As you can see, I've already got my Dolph horse in here, and also have the Pugosaurus, which has been a painting in the past I've done. But I had thought of scenes where maybe I could have designed a new creature as well. I always, yeah, I had many ideas for this, so it was quite good. So tell me about a challenging piece you've had.
I guess the most recent one that I had that was challenging was a piece I did called Hoarder, which was a mermaid piece that I had done, and I sort of took a break from digital painting for quite a while, and it was the first piece that I had chosen to really detail, and I spent quite a bit of time on it. I think I spent maybe 20 something hours on it, and there was just a lot of details. I was really working with texture, and I wanted to add a lot of just little details. Essentially, it was sort of a play off of Ariel from Little Mermaid without direct correlation. And I left the scene open to interpretation as to what it could mean. But I had like bottles and necklaces and coins and a teddy bear and a picture frame, like all these different elements in it, and trying to get the lighting right on each object as well as the person in the scene, and making things three-dimensional and giving it spatial depth was kind of a challenge, especially after taking a break from doing, two-dimensional. Well, I say two-dimensional, but doing really flat colors with just ink on paper. I had to kind of go back and relearn some of the shading techniques that I always used previously. But it was a lot of fun. So I got to look at different fish, ideas on scales and planes, different images from hand, different texture.
You're playing out a little bit.
Yeah. I was just using references for different parts of the picture.
Yeah, definitely. That's what comes down to a lot of reference. Like you can see here, I've got many references. I've got the reference of the owl, and I've got references of the different elements that are in these creatures, and also the past. I also got the concept sketch for the actual creature as well, which helps me out. Because doing a book, so I did my own children's book, I had created to start off with, I created a, what they call a layout sheet of the characters, so the back view, the front view, the side view, how it would look like in those different views, and that helped me out a lot. So yeah, it's gaining reference, and it's gaining the right reference too, because sometimes that coin in your scene may not be in the right light direction, so it might confuse you with that reference, which is okay, but you've got to think that the light in that image is not exactly how you want it in your image, so you've got to change it a little bit. You've got to think about in your painting how it's different from the actual image. Yeah, and it was also a challenge on what you want to put first as well. For this image, I wanted mostly that Pugosaurus to be the main focus. So I made sure the creatures and the characters were both kind of facing in the direction of that character. Yeah,
we were talking about references. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you're talking about references.
Do you ever sketch out like drawings of individual characters first, just to kind of warm up on anatomy and spatial depth and stuff, or do you kind of just go in and pull it together in that way? I mean, do you do any warm-ups, or do you which obviously, if these are your personal characters, you've probably drawn them multiple times, or gotten the concept down. But do you ever like to do warm-up sketches before you go into a detailed piece?
Yeah, sometimes I'm bad for that because I don't warm up all the time. I just go into it. But yeah, it's something I always try and warm up before, like I do a drawing before I start doing it. But usually what ends up happening is that I do little little roughs of basically where I want the characters placed. So I work out all the where all the elements are going. So it, say to represent a coin, I'll just put a circle down, and to represent a box, I'll just put a square down. I'll just do a quick concept illustration of the outlines where I want everything, and then I will focus in on one character at a time and try and get all the poses and everything of that character, and then chop and change between each character. I think I do some warm-ups every now and again. You know, I go to, there's a good site called lineart.com, I think it is, or Line of Action, I think it is, lineofaction.com, and they do heaps of, you can get animal lessons, human anatomy lessons and things like that, where they show you it for how long you want them to show for, so 5 minutes, 30 seconds, and you just do quick poses and things like that. So yeah, those things are helpful, is to do some warm-ups. I don't do them enough, I think, because I seem to just go into it, but I always have that feeling like I know when I'm not ready to draw something. I know when I'm not warmed up enough that I can't draw anything right. I know when I'm at that state. So it's getting out of that state that's what I achieve first. Like this morning I was doing a drawing of a cat, just a naked cat without fur, and it took me a little while, like 10-15 minutes, just to get out of drawing very sketchily, just drawing the idea of it, and then after doing it 3 or 4 times of just roughly placing everything and things like that, then I go in and once I've drawn it enough, it's like, oh, it's starting to look good now. So yeah, and I think an important part to think about when creating a scene is composition. I don't exactly get this right all the time. It's something that is always a challenge for me, doing the right composition, but can be a very crucial part of your work. So how do you think composition plays a role in your work?
I think for me, a lot of times I like to use just, I guess, negative space to help with composition, and I like to emphasize certain shapes within a piece. So again, going back to the mermaid piece I had referenced before, I had used the fins and the shape of the tail and the hair to kind of create this overall circular shape, even though there's negative space between each element to kind of keep the eye going around the picture. And one thing that I had learned in school, in our illustration course, was to, use negative space. Don't be afraid of it. Don't have certain things pointing off the image. You don't want the person's eye, for example, if you have long flowing hair, you don't necessarily want the hair to flow to the outside edge of the picture, coming to a point. It's fine if it goes off completely, but if you have a point, human eye tends to follow that direction and go to, it's almost like an arrow. So then the eye gets led off the page and they're no longer looking at the piece, and instead of pointing it outwards, you could pull the hair inwards, for example, to bring the eye back. And then I like to mess with contours. Something that a teacher of ours in school had constantly driven into my mind, just contours. A lot of people overlap shapes. For example, the
as holding a weapon. And sometimes when overlapping a weapon on top of the manual, instead of looking on the contour, it sets some kind of image of maybe the person's body painting, or maybe the point of the weapon is equal to the point of the flame. So instead of breaking the contour, you just have this line, and it kind of loses the shape in the shape. And so I'm trying to focus on getting
Some of this is not hearing as well.
Is the stream cutting up?
That's better. That's better.
I was just speaking about contours, breaking contours within a piece. Essentially making sure that edges don't line up with edges where you have shapes, overlapping shapes. Creating, if you have something like a weapon, someone's holding a weapon, you don't want the weapon to get lost within the shape of the person. You want it to break the contour so your eye can visibly see that there's a person and a weapon, which is something that they had always taught us in school.
Definitely. Yeah. It's like when one of these classes is that like for instance, you don't want a desk in front of your person or your creature because it takes away from them. You know, you don't want something in front of them for no reason and it's going to take away something from the scene, which is something I've dealt with in the past because, you know, that's where they are. Technically it looks right, but visually it doesn't look right. So yeah, it's about thinking about taking away, and like you were talking about before, is bleeding things off the edges. This can work against you, or it can work for you. Whether there's a reason why you're going to bleed it off the edge. Maybe it's the background and it's not important. Or if it's in a magazine, you don't want anything in the middle because, you know, it'll bleed it. You don't want the important information to be in the middle because when you print it, it will be not looking great. And in composition, there's usually many rules and things that I've learned in the past, like the rule of thirds, where everything should be on the right side of that third half. It's not always has to be used. Sometimes some pieces require you to have everything centerized. Other times it's moving towards the left or moving towards the right. But in this composition here, you can now see that I've got a little image to the side, so it's ideally small window of what I'm looking at fully, so that I can see what it looks like in the far distance. I want to see the image in the far distance. So, you know, print it out if you have to. If you're working digitally, print it out. Traditionally, if you can, if it's on a canvas or if it's on a piece of paper or something, if you can, hang it up and walk a meter away. If you can still get the image or the gist of the image, it's a good piece. There may be still some tweaks to go, but yeah, it's also learning what's important in your scene. Later on, you'll see this in the next part.
Right.
In the next parts, I kind of blur out some of the details in the background. Yeah. How do you put importance on details of?
So when you're creating a scene,
No, you go ask this question. After.
Go ahead.
No, you go. So I have this question afterwards.
Just gonna ask, whenever you're doing a scene, do you ever come up with like a mood that you want to portray, whether it's dark and scary or if it's happy or sad, and then you get into it and then decide that maybe that atmosphere doesn't match what you've actually drawn, what you've ended up conceptualizing. So do you go back and ever find yourself changing maybe the color scheme or the lighting, or do you ever experiment?
Yeah, definitely. It depends on what I'm working on. For something like this, I've in my head I've already worked out what it kind of is the feeling. So it's meeting these magical creatures, that kind of feeling of being immersed in a new world, is what I'm going for this. But yeah, it depends on the piece. Like if I'm creating a poster for something more scary, or want to scare people, then if I see that I'm trying to use this happy kind of bunny, I will go away and be like, okay, maybe I should rethink this. And yeah, so I've had many pieces where I pin it up to the wall or something, and I look at it for a little while, or ditch it, come back and be like, okay, this piece may need its color and its lighting fixed in a certain way, to paint the mood. And you know, there's very many things you can do. You can warm up the colors to make it more warming and more appealing, or you can lighten them up to make them more dull. But yeah, I was going to ask, how do you put importance on details with your characters?
Details. Do you mean like just like texture details or expressions?
Yeah, your texture details, more likely, yeah.
I think for me, like the way you can help show depth in a piece is to, anything that's super duper close to the person, you wouldn't want to put as much detail because it's probably going to be out of focus, or, it's in the foreground. And then, as you get further away on the midground, you would probably want to keep it fairly detailed, and use reference and stuff for textures. I'm constantly looking up patterns for clothing. I look up a lot of cultural clothing, for example, African, Asian, whatever, to get some inspiration on the kind of detail I can put on outfits. And I look up animal patterns when I'm creating a humanoid that has, maybe some skin patterns on them, and depending on the angle and what kind of lighting they're in, whatever's closest to the viewer will be the most detailed, and what's further away, usually put less detail, or something that's symmetrical, mute the colors. So saturated colors is what's the focus of the piece, and then the further away becomes more muted and out of focus.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, I always, I kind of detail the background a little bit, and then I will chuck on a blur, Gaussian blur, or some sort of blur on the background. So those kind of effects help to do that. And I've also done it with one of my traditional pieces, where I kind of smudge out the background a little bit, a bit more, so the background becomes basically blocks of color, and not really any detail, just blocks of color, and the colors of the background, to give focus on the red panda, which has most of the detail on it. Yeah, so I always put the most details at the front. it has in the past, it has been a thing where I do put details everywhere, and I lose focus on some of the more important elements in the drawing or the illustration. So yeah, it's constantly going back and forth between that. So you have to make sure, like for this image here, I've got a little view there, to make sure that I'm not getting too close into the detail. So you have to constantly step back and look at it from a distance, which is a good skill to have.
Right.
Yeah. Were you gonna say something?
Sorry, I think it was taking a second for it to catch up. So you do a lot of animal art. Do you like to keep your drawings more realistic as how they would act in the wild, or do you ever do anything that's maybe more simplified and like giving the animals human interaction, like emotions and expressions, or do you like to keep it more realistic in your pieces?
It depends on the piece. I do like aim for as realistic as I can, but I just like to show how or what this creature is. So in some of my pieces I do like to show maybe how that animal or creature would feel in this situation. Like in this one, I wanted to have this Pugosaurus more placid, just going along his day, having a nice little drink from the water, where I wanted the Dolph Horse creature to be more playful in the scene. It's something that I've tackled before. As I say, I've done a children's book where I really wanted to show more emotion in the characters, so it was a challenge for me to get that into the drawing, and it always is a struggle to get realism over emotions and feelings. How about you? Do you do more emotional things per se?
Since I do a lot of human paintings, portraits, and stuff, yeah, I tend to have more emotions. I got into a really bad habit many years ago of just creating the same facial expression in every piece. I think a lot of concept artists kind of go through that phase where they just sort of repeat the same, even if it is an expression like angry face or smiling face, you sometimes get into a habit of creating the same thing over and over again, which can really make the pieces just look flat because so many people would end up seeing the same thing. So, I recently have started doing gesture drawings of faces, trying to depict different emotions, and make them different in each piece, just to give variety and break away from it, which can also help with creating a concept. If you start off with an angry face, then you can decide what kind of concept, why is that character angry, or why is that animal, upset, like what's going on around it to invoke that emotion. So it can kind of be fun instead of engineer a scene, starting off with an emotion first and then build around it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, emotion's a hard thing. I learned a good way in one of my illustration classes is that to picture yourself doing that. Yeah, and everyone at first is like, what the hell? Like, why should I picture myself doing this emotion, which is something I'm constantly trying to get across. And some characters could be close to someone you know, so that could be a helpful thing, is just think about, how they react in that situation and look at their reactions, and that may come across in your painting. So yeah, it's good to go out and meet people and then see their emotions and things towards stuff. And sometimes I see a character or a animal reacting or a person reacting in such a way that I'm like, oh cool, I want that in my painting. I want this happy panda in my painting. I want this kind of emotion in my scene. So sometimes it's good to get reference for that too. In this as much, I didn't really get reference for that. I just kind of thought about how it would look, how would this animal look as a curious animal. I've still got quite a bit of process to go. I've got the next videos. So I can talk about this kind of thing in the next few videos about it. Yeah. So we haven't got too long. Probably another 5 minutes ish. And yeah, here you can see me really fastly putting in some details in the background at the moment. Just trying to get like little details of the water, how the water would look, how the grass and how the trees would look, kind of thing. It's something I kind of struggle with because I'm always one to draw more creatures and animals. When it comes to backgrounds, I try my best to do the backgrounds, but I'm not a huge background artist. So now I'm getting into more kind of on the side. I'm doing some environment arts, just the environments. Do you ever have tackles with backgrounds versus more imagery ones?
Like character art.
Yeah, characters versus backgrounds. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely more practiced in doing character art than I would be backgrounds. One thing that I'm terrible at is trees and mountains. I never thought that drawing either one of those things would be difficult, but for some reason I just never have been able to do it, I guess, with depth. Like I can get the textures and things down, but without reference, it never fails that my trees just look like blobs of broccoli and my mountains look like they are 6 inches tall when they're supposed to, be the scene in the background. And so I've always struggled with those things, but I love painting clouds and things like that. Again, just have to use reference when I can. And I enjoy doing a lot of just landscapes. I love mountain sceneries, but I always like to add some fantasy elements to it by adding maybe some foliage and greenery that doesn't exist in the real world, changing the color palette, maybe putting multiple planets in the sky, just to make it different. And I love to paint water. It's a lot of fun to do reflections and to create the ripples in the water. And I'm not very good with many things like architecture. That's definitely one thing that I would struggle with in the city.
Yeah, definitely. Same here. I struggle with technical drawings and things like that. I did it in school, but I didn't like it because I didn't like math and having to rule things. I liked freehand drawing. So there's many ways around it though. Like people have come up with this brush. That's a perspective brush, and you just click it, and it's on your work. So it's something I'll probably use when I'm doing more of this landscape work, to build up my landscape stuff. And you have to put importance on background versus the character as well, because it's not all about the character. There is, what kind of world he lives in as well, and you want a great scene, a great importance on that. Yeah. So to be my last question, I'd say, is what advice would you give fellow artists to create a good scene?
I think if you're uncertain of exactly what you're trying to capture in a scene, it's always a good idea to rough out some thumbnails and maybe even do a slightly larger concept piece. Because truthfully, industry standard in a lot of places, they require that. It's just part of the process to get a scene down and to learn how to conceptualize different elements. And so, creating a small thumbnail is also a good reference for you. Some people, for me, for example, my memory is terrible. I'll think of something that I really want to do, and then I'll forget a key element in the piece. And if I take the time to scribble down a thumbnail, I can reference back to that and make sure that what I end up translating in the final piece is the original concept. Use reference when you can. I mean, it's going to be the best thing. I think it's important that you know the foundation of what you're trying to create. And once you do, then you can go back and make it your own. Change the colors and add features to it that don't exist in the real world, which is kind of fantasy and science fiction and things. But it's always a good idea to have reference. It's what we humans know that exists. And then I think, practice.
Yeah, practice makes perfect, as they all say. But yeah, just practice, draw multiple things, and going out of your comfort zone, not just always drawing a character, doing more background stuff as well to help you out. Thank you for watching this show. Sorry if it wasn't the best stream ever, but yeah, it will be up. I'm not too sure what's going to happen with that. It'll be up on live stream. But yeah, thanks for joining me. Please like, share, and comment any questions that you do have. And just subscribe. So thank you very much for watching. And thank you, Megan, for joining me.
Thank you.
Good. Bye.